Pathfinder is a game about fighting monsters, but even so, we like monsters. Monsters are the star of the show after all. Once you've been playing Pathfinder for a while, you might get really good at your class. But the game doesn't get boring because there's always a variety of monsters with strange abilities to deal with. All monsters have traits, usually at least 2. One represents their size. There are 6 size categories that are roughly comparable to a cat, child, human, horse, elephant, and everything bigger, like a T-Rex. They each take up different amounts of squares of spaces on the battle mat, except gargantuan creatures whose exact dimensions might be up to the GM's judgment, since that size is a catch-all for everything big. Being bigger doesn't necessarily mean the monster has better reach, but it often does. Any reach except 5 feet will be listed explicitly in the stat block. Tiny creatures can also share squares with other creatures, which they actually need to do since they often have a reach of 0 feet. That means they need to be in the same square as the opponent to attack them. The other type of traits are the 18 creature types. These traits are usually descriptive, not prescriptive, like calling something a chair. Chairs tend to have similar properties, but just because you call something a chair doesn't mean it gains extra chair-like properties. Creature type traits are the same. For example, dragons can usually breathe some element, but just because you're a dragon doesn't mean you automatically get that ability. These abilities associated with the creature type are usually written directly in the creature stat block. The purpose of these traits is for other abilities to interact with them. Let's say you use a spell like Summon Fae. Well, that means you can just go through all the monsters with the trait Fae and figure out which one you want to summon. There are other descriptive traits other than these 18 as well. For example, most dinosaurs have animal and dinosaur traits, but this is for the same reason. You might get a sword that does extra damage to dinosaurs and you can use the dinosaur trait to determine which monsters qualify. There are some traits that do confer abilities, which can make it a bit confusing, but the purpose is the same, which is interactions with other abilities. For example, the mindless trait is for mindless creatures like skeletons and makes them immune to mental effects, so you can't use effects like charm. Amphibious and aquatic are pretty obvious, since amphibious creatures can breathe air and water, and aquatic creatures can breathe water, and both creatures don't take the usual -2 penalty for bludgeoning and slashing strikes underwater. An incorporeal creature is like a ghost and can pass through walls, but if it starts its turn in a wall, it's slowed 1 for its whole turn. Incorporeal and corporeal creatures can pass through each other, but not end a turn inside each other, and neither can perform strength-based skill checks against each other like shove. Swarms are creatures that are actually made of hundreds of itty-bitty creatures and can occupy the same space as other creatures and are immune to being grappled, prone, and restrained. In Pathfinder, every time you level up, you add 1 to any modifier you're at least trained in. Naturally, the monsters you fight are also going to end up getting stronger and stronger to compensate, which means it can be difficult to get an idea of how good a monster is at a certain thing. Here's a tip for game masters. You can look up Pathfinder's monster building guidelines and use it like a chart to determine how good a certain statistic is for its level. For example, caveworms have an AC of 32, which seems really high, but since a caveworm is level 13, it means it's going to be fighting characters that also have really high striking bonuses. So how high is 32 really? Well, if we can check this chart, we see it's actually low. That doesn't mean you need to look up the descriptor on this table for every monster, but it can illuminate how the monsters are balanced. For example, a monster's saving throws are fortitude, reflex, and will. Animals, for example, usually have bad will saves but good fortitude saves, while spellcasters have good will saves but bad other saves. It's good to know which saving throw is the lowest so you can choose spells and maneuvers that target that save. Hit points and AC work to create the feel of fighting the monster. A high AC means you won't hit a lot, so it can feel like the enemy is constantly avoiding your attacks. But if it has a low hit point, then as soon as one connects, you might defeat the monster in 1 strike. A lot of creatures have a set of strikes I call the jaws and claws. Often these strikes are pretty similar, but one attack, like the jaws, has more damage, while the other attack, claws, has the agile trait. That means the claws attack is less affected by the multiple attack penalty than jaws. So when the monster attacks, it should first attack with jaws as its primary powerful attack, but then use claws for follow-up attacks to take advantage of the lower attack penalty. Perception, athletics, acrobatics, and stealth aren't the only skills a monster will know, but they're pretty common, simply because these are the skills that are often used in combat. Perception and stealth for initiative, athletics for grabbing and shoving, and acrobatics to tumble through. Many monsters also have weaknesses, resistances, and immunities. All weaknesses and resistances have a damage type and a value. If a monster has a weakness to a specific damage type, like fire, anytime they're damaged by fire damage, they add their weakness value to that damage. For example, if you use breathe fire on a monster with a weakness to fire 5, then you just add 5 to whatever damage you dealt with the spell. Likewise, if you're fighting a ghost with resistance 10 to all non-magical damage, then subtract 10 from any of the damage of your attacks. These calculations happen after the damage is doubled from a critical hit. Another popular ability is grab, knockdown, or push. Each one corresponds to a different maneuver, grapple, trip, or shove respectively, and they get attached to a monster's strike. If the associated strike is successful, the monster can spend another action to use the respective of maneuver. Even though it takes an action, the bonus is that this maneuver is exempt from the multiple attack penalty. It doesn't get penalized, nor does it add to the penalty for subsequent attacks. And like Jaws and Claws, the ability tells you how the monster wants to fight. A wolf has Knockdown attached to its Jaws attack, so a wolf should bite at a character, then knock it prone with its second action. Another popular ability monsters have are Afflictions, such as Venomous Fangs, that poison the target on a bite. There are 3 types of Afflictions. Poisons are acute, short, and deadly. Diseases are difficult to cure and can last multiple days, and curses are really hard to cure and can last as long as it takes to remove them. They all follow the same rules, the Affliction rules. Afflictions follow a template like this. Let's say you just reached stage 2 of having cave worm venom. First, you take 66 poison damage and become enfeebled 2. Your enfeebled condition is independent of you being poisoned, so even if you become instantly cured, you'll still be enfeebled. The important number now is here, the interval. For cave worm venom, it's 1 round. They're even in order. First you reach stage 2, then the damage, then enfeebled 2, and then you're here and you wait 1 round. So after 1 round, then you make another check. That's where you reference this saving throw. In this case, a DC 13 fortitude save. When you make this check, something will happen. That's all you need to remember, because you can probably guess that if you succeed, the stage goes down by 1, and if you fail, it goes up by 1. And if you critically succeed or fail, it does the same, but by 2. From there, you know exactly what happens. If you go down to stage 1, you take the damage, you get enfeebled 2, which doesn't matter because you're still enfeebled, and then you wait 1 round. It's only slightly different if you're first exposed to the affliction, because as soon as you're exposed to the affliction, you make a saving throw. This saving throw is the do I have to worry about this saving throw, and if you succeed, you can ignore the entire affliction system until you get stung again. If you fail, then you have to wait for the onset time. Many afflictions, like caveworm venom, don't have an onset time, and once the onset time is done, then you go to stage 1. Then it's exactly as you know it. Damage effects interval check. This video was brought to you by Monster Core. Thank you, Paizo, for my complimentary copy. If you like cave worms, check out my adventure Shrine of the Crystal Cave. Link in the description.